Hi everyone on Facebook Live. We're here at City Gate with Main Point Women of Faith, and I think we're ready to get started. I'm going to introduce our speaker. Are you ready, Kat? Okay. And I don't know what her real name is, but she told me her name's Kat Royce, and I don't know if that stands for Catherine or
Kathleen.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for coming, and I'm just going to say a prayer for you, and then it's all yours. Okay? Are you going to talk about your shirt at all?
I will.
Okay, good. I was hoping that you would. Okay. Well, Father God, thank you so much for Kat and her willingness to come and share what you put on her heart with us tonight. And I just ask that you take away any nervousness she might be feeling, or anything that might hinder your words that you want us to hear tonight. So we just give this time to you and give us open hearts and open ears to what you want to teach us through Kat's testimony. I think that's what she's going to share some of. So just be with her. We ask you to bless her life, bless her family, her ministry, her work. Just be with her, and we just thank you for her life and everything that you're doing in and through her. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. How's everybody doing?
Good.
You're awake for me for a little bit. Now with the air on, hopefully. I tend to have a soft voice, so people tend to fall asleep when I speak, so I will not be offended if you do. Well, a little bit about myself. So my name is Kathleen. You'll hear people call me Kathy, Kathleen, Kat. My dad calls me Katie. My sister calls me T. I go by a lot of different names. So if you hear Onward, which is my tribe name, which I can talk a little bit about. But I live in the area. I have 2 kids. My son Wyatt is 9. My daughter Olive is 7. My watch is going off because my son's at a baseball game. Currently they are winning 8-4. They're in the last inning. So I was at a 4th grade field trip today. We're at the Capitol and then ran to baseball, and I'm here, so I apologize that I'm a little worn today in my hair and appearance. But I grew up in New Jersey. So I'm not a native to Lancaster. I did my undergrad work out in the North Shore of Boston. I went to Gordon College. So that's a small liberal arts school right by the beach. Very, very nice up there. And then I did my graduate work at Westchester University here. I work for Landis Communities. That's in Lidditz. So it is a CCRC, which is a continuing care retirement community. So basically, once you hit the retirement age, you put in some of your funds to then basically be taken care of for the rest of your life in this retirement community. So you may start off in a cottage or in an apartment, and then you continue to age, and then you'll have a place in personal care where you'll just be checked up on if you're still mobile and active and moving. And then skilled nursing, should you reach that part of your life and need full care up until the time that you see Jesus. And so it's just a beautiful ministry. Love working with seniors. It's fantastic there. So I'm also on the board for Ephrata Area Social Services, now the Community Hive. So the name will be released, I believe it's June 2nd, and open to the community, which is fantastic. So if you don't know, is everybody here familiar with Ephrata Area Social Services? So wonderful. They're fantastic, and you'll understand a little bit more why I'm on the board there. I also serve on the board for the Touchstone Foundation. So it is educating youth on mental health and wellness, but also just ensuring that youth know kind of the mental health careers that are out there. So looking for more therapists to then assist more people here in Lancaster and then outward, which is fantastic. So I want to start off with just 2 verses for this morning. I have notes, but I might veer away from them just for today. So John 16:33 says, Jesus says, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Psalm 34:19, the righteous person faces many troubles, but the Lord comes to the rescue each time. So today I want to talk a little bit about my story. Because if I give you a high-level overview of who I am, that kind of makes me sound like, oh, you have no problems in the world. Look at you. You work in Landis. You have 2 kids. Good for you, right? But what's under the surface? And those are things that I've kept to myself for over 30-something years. This is the first time I'm actually talking a bit more about my testimony, mostly because there's been a lot of shame. There's been a lot of embarrassment. There has been fear that I will be judged for the things that have happened in my life, and so I have kept it super closed. And a lot of things that have happened to me, I don't know about you, but when trauma happens, for me, I put it in a box, put the lid on it, threw it in the back of my head, and thought, good enough, we'll keep it there. But those things started bubbling to the surface until I sought counseling, and I've been still in counseling, which is great, kind of coping through. So I'll kind of take you back several years into the 1960s when my parents were born. And so my dad is from New Jersey. My mom was born in Lima, Peru. And so they actually both met in high school. And then they ended up having my sister when they were still in high school together. And so after they had my sister, then all of us followed suit about a year in between after. So my siblings and I are all about a year apart. I have 4 siblings. I have 3 sisters and 1 brother. They all live throughout the United States. And so when people hear me say, I'm going to California, Arizona, New York, Massachusetts, I'm visiting my siblings. So most people think I'm taking you to vacation. I just have a free place to stay, so which is really fun. But my dad and my mom, 2 awesome people, but my dad had a lot of demons growing up. So he grew up with 7 other siblings, but his dad was a very abusive alcoholic. And his mom died when he was a teenager, and so he was left with his dad, who didn't show love and care. And I bring that up solely because sometimes in our life, the environment in which we live in can then transfer into other parts of your life. It doesn't always happen, but to my dad, it did. And so when we were kids, my dad struggled with alcoholism. And so awesome dad, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, when he wasn't drinking, best parent. When he was drinking, he was probably the most meanest person on earth, would say the most hurtful things, would do the most hurtful things. It was to the point where I hated evenings because he would come home from work, would drink all throughout the night, pass out. Holidays were the worst, and weekends were the worst because he would come home, or he would be home, would start drinking as soon as he woke up to the time he went to bed. Some of my memories are just glass bottles breaking, screaming, yelling, police officers, hiding in the corner of my bed. I had a bunk bed, just hoping he wouldn't find me to try to pull me out of bed. So whether that's the yelling and screaming and whatnot, and my mom just took it, and she tried her best to protect us, would always send us upstairs, but he would always drag my siblings and me back downstairs to either tell us that we weren't good enough, or we weren't the best kids, or whatever he could find that he was struggling with, his anger, his resentment, all the things that he didn't hear from his dad ended up being thrown on us. And then he would never apologize. So the next day he would apologize to my mom, but would never apologize to us. So when he would say these nasty things to us, he would go about the day as if nothing ever happened. He'd like, let's go to the park. How about we'll go buy candy or cookies or things of that sort. And that was always something that as kids we struggled with. Like, how does dad, we don't quite understand. And at the same time, my dad was very involved in the church. So that was another facet. So my parents, we went to Catholic church, and my dad grew up as an altar boy, grew up just serving in church. And my dad on Sundays would always ensure that we went to Sunday school and that we knew who God was. But God was more so this big, scary person. He wasn't somebody that you can easily talk to. You had a guardian angel you can talk to who would talk to God for you. You talk to Mary who can talk to God for you. But you wouldn't really go to God, the source, because he was too busy. And so God, if you were a good person, good things would happen to you. If you were a bad person, then bad things would happen to you. And so for me in my relationship and walk with God, that's how I knew who God was. I just knew I had to be a good kid. And so as a kid, I kind of took on trying to keep peace within the home. So if my dad was drinking and I knew that dinner wasn't done, or my siblings, they didn't do their homework, I would ensure that everything was calm. If I heard my dad getting upset, I would quickly rush my siblings out of the room. We would make sure that everything is calm. So again, my dad wouldn't come after any of us. And so, because my parents were very young when they had my siblings and me, they struggled financially. And so when we struggled financially, we had places like Ephrata Area Social Services in New Jersey that we would visit often, or we had people who would come over and would drop off food. Or we would have food stamps or WIC or any of those programs that would help us eat. Oftentimes my mom, she would play the flashlight game with us. So she would say, all right guys, tonight for supper, we're gonna do candlelight dinner. And she'd give out all her candles, she'd get out all of her flashlights. But I never knew that it was because they couldn't pay the electric bill. And so she would ensure that we didn't know, so she hid that from us. But now looking back, just knowing that they couldn't afford to keep the electric on, sometimes they couldn't afford to keep the heat on. And so we would always be bundled up or whatnot, and we couldn't afford new clothes. So it was always hand-me-downs. And this had occurred from the time we were babies all the way up until almost high school age. And with that, both my parents had to work, but they couldn't afford childcare. And so we had a next door neighbor family who lived to the left of us. We lived in Section 8 housing. And so my parents trusted that they would take care of us, while they were at work for a few hours. And so they would send us off to our neighbor's house. And as soon as my mom came home, then she would pick us up and we'd continue about our day. But what they didn't know is that our next door neighbor was abusing my sisters and me during that time. And so we would tell my mom, we don't want to go back there, please don't send us back there. But my parents would continue to send us back there. And personally, I did not know how to tell my parents what was happening, because they were going through so much and they themselves were under so much stress. How could we say that this was happening at the same time? And so that probably occurred for about a year or so, up until our neighbors moved away. And it was at that point in time that my siblings, at least my sisters and I, we were able to breathe. And that was about the time we were probably about 5 to 6 years old, which is a little wild to think about, that's something that's still very vivid in all of our minds, to be quite honest, if we do talk about that. And so kind of fast forwarding a little bit into school. So in elementary school, my parents had us in Catholic school for about 2 years. So we had somebody in the church who paid for my siblings and me to go to Catholic school for about 2 years. And then my parents could not afford that moving forward, so we went to public school. And then in public school, that's just when the bullying started. And so when we were in Catholic school, we had to wear all the same outfits. So the same uniform, same shoes, same everything. It didn't matter. Nobody knew if you didn't wash your clothes the same day, because you looked exactly the same every day. But it's very different in public school. And so because we didn't have, the nicest clothes, my siblings and I, or at least I'll talk more about myself, was bullied for my clothes. And then I was also bullied for my outer appearance as well. So I was on the playground, about 9 years old, and I had a couple kids come up to me and they told me that I had to go back to Mexico where I belonged. And I did not belong here. And just the bullying then started. So it was because I was too dark. It was because I was illegal. It was because I just didn't belong. And that just stuck with me, that sense of just not belonging. And so again, that was something else that I felt I couldn't talk to my parents about, because I am a spitting image of my mom. So if you have my mom standing next to me, it's copy and paste. And I didn't want to hurt my mom's feelings. I didn't want to tell her that I was being bullied at school because we looked alike. And again, I knew what they were going through financially, and as a kid, I felt like I kind of took that on, and I didn't want them to have any more stress, so I held that together. And one of the things my parents taught us as kids, which now, looking back, probably wasn't the best advice, but it was what happens in our home stays in our home. And so you don't talk about what happens outside of our home. And it was mostly just my parents not wanting to be judged. And so my dad was very prideful, and so the alcoholism stayed inside the home. Even though we had members of the church who knew our family intimately, they couldn't know that my dad was struggling. They couldn't know that at 11 p.m. at night on a Sunday, my mom would take us driving just to get away from my dad until he fell asleep or passed out. And we wouldn't come home till 3 or 4 in the morning. She'd get us ready for school and send us back off again. And that was almost every single Sunday. And so we had to keep all of that in. And so going to school and not having, I honestly do not have the best eyesight. Natural selection would have taken me a long time ago. We not had the invention of glasses. My parents couldn't afford glasses. Things like that I didn't get glasses until I was probably closer to high school. And so kind of being a little bit behind in that sense, because my parents, unfortunately couldn't afford to take us at that point. And my last name starts with an R, and our school kind of had us alphabetized, so I was placed in the far back of the classroom, so I couldn't see the board. So I wasn't doing well in elementary school, wasn't doing well in middle school. My teachers just thought that I was slower. I was a slow learner, and my mom thought, no, but she seems to, catch on so quickly. I just couldn't see. And around that same time, along with the bullying, I had a speech impediment. And so it was something that even now I have to slow myself down, because when I get really excited and I start to talk, I start to stutter. And so you'll hear me go but, and I have to stop, slow myself down, take a deep breath, but, so the words can come out. And so I stutter with my stutter. And so if you can imagine kind of going through public school, coming back, from going from Catholic school to public school, struggling with bullying because of my outer appearance, my clothes, my skin, and then also my speech as well. So just not feeling like I belonged at all with anyone within my classes, minus one friend that I had. I'll never forget her. Her name was Rachel, and she would always stick up for me. And I actually don't know where Rachel is to this day, but I will never forget her. Anytime somebody would start to talk about my clothes or my speech or my outward appearance, she would say, just leave her alone. Just don't talk to her. And she's like, come on, Kat, let's go. And she would just take me out of that situation. And she was that one person that I could just rely on to be able to, help me out of that. But she also didn't know what I was struggling with at home. And I didn't want the other kids to know, because I thought that, goodness, if they knew that my dad is abusing alcohol, how am I even going to have any friends at all? What are people going to think of me? And so I didn't talk about that. And so fast forward to about high school. At this point, we're trying to figure out colleges and where to go. And so my parents, they were part of the Catholic Church, but then we had new neighbors that had moved in, and they were part of an evangelical free church. And so they had brought us to church a few times, and the pastor there had taught us a bit more about having a relationship with God and what that looks like, and how to pray, and just talking to God. And then they actually sent us to camp for the first time. And it was an EV free camp, and it was so much fun. We just spent like an entire week with just a bunch of other camp kids, and from there, that's how I knew I wanted to be involved in camp ministry. And so in high school, I ended up going away for about 9 weeks for my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, where I worked with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so I'd go off to camp, and then I'd have a cabin full of 6 to 8 campers, and we would talk about God, and I would take care of these campers. Some of our campers had very severe disabilities, and others had very moderate to mild disabilities. And so that taught me a lot about who God is, and just all the images that God has created people in, and it was just a new eye-opening. And so I wanted to learn more about God, which is why I ended up going to Gordon. And so, Gordon wasn't too conservative, it wasn't too liberal, it was right down the middle. And I just wanted to know, who is this God? Because right now I really didn't know who he was. And so at Gordon, I was able to go to various churches. That was probably one of our big projects as a junior. We had to go to 8 different churches that were not like anything we've ever known, just to learn about who God is and how other people worship God. And that then just kind of opened my eyes and also made me very confused as to who God is. I don't know if y'all have ever tried to go out to different churches, but I've never seen people raise their hands and pray before. So coming from a more conservative background, that was a no-no. You don't lift your hands, you keep your hands here, and you don't raise your hands when you're worshiping. So that was something new, that hey, that's not a bad thing. Everybody worships differently. So it was a really neat class. But also in college, My sister went off to college first, and when she came back home for one of her breaks, she had talked about something called the freshman 15. And that's when you go off to college and you gain a bunch of weight because you have more of a meal pass. And you have to watch what you eat. But at that point in time, going from elementary school to when people had bullied me for my outer appearance, I had kept that with me throughout middle school and high school. And it was high school where I finally started to find out who I was and more comfortable in my skin. And then when I heard about college and then potentially gaining this weight, it set something in my brain that went backwards. And so I ended up, I stopped eating when I was in college. So had just body dysmorphic disorder, slight bit of anorexia, just did not want to eat anymore because I thought I can't gain this weight. People approve of me right now. If I look any different, nobody's going to talk to me, nobody's going to be my friend, nobody is going to want this. And so I wanted to be chosen by somebody. So I felt as though, growing up I was constantly trying to protect other people, but I didn't have anybody protecting me and telling me, you are beautiful just the way you are. And so I was looking for that validation. So I thought, okay, well right now I feel as though I am good the way I am, so I was petrified. And so I weigh, I'm not afraid to say, about almost 140 right now. And I was about 95 pounds when I was in college. So I had just lost everything. And I remember it was my gram who had pointed out, he came home, it was almost my senior year. I took pictures and I had a friend point out that my head looked really big in my photos because I had lost so much weight. The only thing you could see is my head. And I have a naturally big head, my son does too. So you can really just point that in the picture. But I thought, no, I look good, look at that body, look how thin you are. And I would look and I'm like, oh, everything's fine. Then my gram had pointed it out, and my gram spoke very little English, but she sat me down one day, and she's like, Kathleen, what is going on? She said, you are not healthy. Something is happening. And it was my gram. Now, I was also a spitting image of my gram. You put my gram and my mom and I next together, we all look alike. And I couldn't tell my gram that, well, this all started because somebody told me that, you're not beautiful, you don't belong. And I didn't want to hurt my gram because I felt, well, if I tell her that I'm ugly, I'm a reflection of her. I don't want her to think that I'm calling her ugly. And so, I just talked to my gram and I said, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. Everything is fine. And she said, no, not everything is fine. You need to eat. And as my gram did, she would put a huge bowl of food in front of me and she would make me eat. And she had told me that you are not going to get strong if you don't eat and take care of yourself. So it was at that point that I started to reset, and I thought about food not being the enemy, but food being the sustenance that I needed to be able to run, to be able to get through the day. I was so tired. I could not get through a day without being exhausted and sleeping all the time. And I couldn't do fun things because I had just lost so much weight and couldn't do much. And so I finally started to work out. I understood what protein was and the importance of protein and eating carbs and good fats and things of that sort. And it was around that time, towards in the middle of college-ish, that I met my now ex-husband. And so first we met, it was like a fairy tale. We both worked together at a Christian college, at Christian summer camp. And I thought, wow, thank you, God. You put somebody absolutely amazing in my life. I'm so excited. And at this point, my relationship with God was getting a little bit better to the point I can actually talk with him and have a conversation. And then when my ex-husband and I got married, it was almost as if like a flip had switched. And so what I thought, when he would call me beautiful and he would affirm who I was on the outside, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. But when we got married, all of that stopped. And he more so just turned to focusing on work and forgot about me. And so work became a priority. I was more secondary. And so I thought, okay, how do I make him happy? What do we do? So do we need to move? Do we need to buy a house? Do we need to have kids? And so I just kind of kept pushing. So let's be happy, let's join a gym together. So we joined a gym together. But he wasn't happy there. And then I thought, okay, well then let's move and let's maybe get a different house. Maybe we'll be happy. Still wasn't happy. Okay, well let's have kids. People say kids will make everything better. Had kids. Still he did not seem happy. And I love my kids. My kids are the best gift God could have ever given me. It's just unfortunate that my ex-husband thought work is still the priority versus a family. We just had very different values, and so it ended up that I, at that point thought, God, I don't know what you're doing, but I am not happy. I don't know who this person is who's not choosing me. And so at that point, I was frustrated with God, and I made an impulsive decision. And rather than seeking God and trying to figure out my marriage and working through it, I went through with a divorce. And I will say to this day, I don't regret that. But looking back now, the relationship I have with God now, I would have done things differently had I had the relationship I have with God now. And so, and I say that just in case anybody is struggling, to really just seek God and counseling in that. And so around that time, when my ex-husband and I were together, we did start going to a church called LCBC. And so we went to the Mannheim campus, and that's the first time I really just started to know a really bit more about God and the friend that he is. So it kind of turned to more of that, God is actually your friend, somebody you can talk to, more of a best friend that you can have. And all you have to do is just communicate with him. Just have a conversation like I'm having with you right now and just talk to God. And it was a really neat thing. And I really resonated with all of the messages. Pastor David Ashcroft was the pastor back then. Now it's Jason if you go to LCBC at all. But at that point when we had kids, my daughter and son, every time we would go to LCBC, they would get sick when they were in kid ministry. And I couldn't continue to take off of work because my ex-husband was working out in Philadelphia, could not take up time off or would not take time off, so I would be the one who would have to take time off. And so I didn't have enough PTO to use, and so I just told my ex-husband we need to stop going to church on Sundays. We can watch online or something, but we can't continue with our kids continually getting sick. And my son and my daughter, they both have different conditions. My daughter has agenesis of the corpus callosum, which means that she is missing her corpus callosum here, so it puts together both your right and left brain. And so when she was in the womb, we didn't know if she was going to have severe intellectual disabilities or if she was going to come out without any disabilities at all. To date, she has reached all of her milestones, which is great, but we're still navigating a black hole. And it was during that time we were still going to LCBC that I really had trouble trusting God. We just talked about trusting God, but how do you trust a God when you don't know if your baby is doing well in here? And how do you trust a God when you have doctors telling you that your daughter could have severe disabilities or maybe no disabilities at all? How do you trust which outcome is going to be when you want this, but God might give you this? And so I started to back away from God. And then when my daughter was born, I thought, oh, thank you, God, you're wonderful. That brought me closer to God. But then when my daughter started getting sick and I had no PTO, that brought me further from God. And then when we stopped going to church, my relationship with God just spread apart. And then when my husband and I got a divorce, I hated God. And I say that word, and I know that that word is really strong, but I was so mad at God. And I thought, God, I've been through so much as a kid. I thought I found somebody who loved me for me and my outside and everything, and I was going to have my perfect fairy tale happy ending, and I wouldn't be a single mom. And now here I am. I'm like, I hate you. How could you do this to me? And I just thought, you know what? Forget you, God. I'm going to do things my way. And so I ended up, I got a new job, and I moved out with the kids, and I thought, okay, we're going to do this. But every day was so hard. Every day I would cry, and I kind of sunk into depression. And it was so bad to the point where when my kids would be with their dad on the weekend, I could not get out of bed. I tried, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I would just cry. And I would sit in my car, and I would cry in the garage. I didn't know what to do. And it was at one point back in 2022 that I was in bed. My kids were with their dad, and I said, God, I wish you could take me right now. And that was the first time I ever had thoughts of suicide. And I thought, I can't be here anymore. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to go through another day with this pain. I don't want to go through another day where I can't get out of bed. I'm like, I want it all to be over. Just take it away from me now. And so it was at that point then all of a sudden it felt as though like I had a jolt in my body. And I thought, what are you doing? Like, what are you thinking? What is wrong with you? And so I thought, God, I'm at my low, and I rolled myself out of bed, and I laid on the floor. I was face down on my carpet in my room, and I cried, and I said, God, I can't do this by myself. Like, I need you. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't do this by myself. Like, please, God, help me. And so I said, I will go back to church. I'm like, I will do whatever it is you need me to do. I'm like, but please get these thoughts out of my head, and please come back. And the whole time I didn't realize God never left me. He was always there. I just rejected him. And I thought, God, I don't need you. But he was just still watching over me, protecting me. He was there. And so I went back to church, and I went back to LCBC, and I poured myself. I overpoured. I was volunteering in 2 different kid ministries, 2 different campuses, volunteered for Night to Shine. I was on that committee, decided I'm going to go and do that too. And then I said, God, stretch me. Take me where you need me. So I went to Guatemala in 2023. And it was someplace I needed to be. And at first I thought, when I read the description, it said we're going to build houses. And I thought, awesome, we're going to build medical tents. This is great. Because I thought, I lift weights. I can carry wood up and down a mountain. Sure, no problem. But what it was actually a medical camp with a medical team. So I was with a whole bunch of clinical personnel, and I was the only non-clinical person. So I ended up going on a missions trip with a bunch of doctors and nurse practitioners, and here I am, human resources. I go, what do I do? So I thought, when we talk to people, I don't really speak Spanish, I speak Spanglish. So I ended up helping a friend of mine who's in dentistry, and so I helped her pull teeth. I helped her brush teeth, and that was the one thing I can do and I can help with. But my goodness, did it help me see things from a different perspective. And if you've never gone to a different country, wow, just the privilege we have here. Like I would see all these little kids running, just what looked like cornfields and huts everywhere, and these kids would be running, and all they would have for a meal that day is a lollipop and a cup of coffee. But because we came and we were able to provide sandwiches and chips and whatnot, they were able to eat for the week that we were there. It was absolutely incredible. And then when we came back, I remember my kids and I, we were in Reamstown, they were having some fair, and they had free food, just free hot dogs and hamburgers and french fries and drinks. And I remember peeking over into the trash can, seeing hot dogs just lined up on top of each other, and I just cried. And I thought, wow, those kids in Guatemala would be thrilled to have all of that food in that trash can. And I thought, wow, were we gluttonous? And my kid's like, Mom, what is going on? And I was like, you eat that hot dog. I'm like, I don't want to see it. So God had taught me a lot there and stretched me a lot throughout that trip. And so fast forward a little bit to 2024. So my kids and I continue to go to LCBC. The relationship with my ex-husband starts to get a little bit better. We're great co-parents right now, which is fantastic. We sit next to each other at all games and parent-teacher conferences, and praise God, that is just God. That is only through God's grace that we are able to do everything together as a unit for our kids. And one thing that I never wanted to be a divorced parent. Going through what my parents went through, I thought that I would not be in a toxic relationship, and that I would have the complete opposite, and I would have an opposite life of what my parents gave to us. And then part of my depression and the reason for suicidal thoughts was just feeling as though I failed tremendously, because I was in this part of my life, and I thought, I'm going to do better than what my parents were able to give me. But I felt like I failed my kids by leaving my ex-husband and getting out of that situation where I didn't feel loved. But it turns out, that God really used that situation for good, which I'm extremely grateful for. And so about a year ago, I found what's called Women's Alliance. And so I was still struggling, with my faith, and I was trucking along, trusting God. He brought me to Landis Communities, which is a faith-based organization. So an organization where I could freely talk about God, where I worked previously at Penn Medicine, which was fantastic. However, I couldn't freely talk about my relationship with God with anyone. Whereas now, where I work at Landis, we have pastoral services, and we have devotions on Tuesdays and devotions every morning, and we talk about Jesus, and it is just such a different environment than what I'm used to working in. And to be able to have people who say, I'm praying for you, is just something that I personally need. And not every person of faith needed or needs, but I personally had needed that. And so God brought me to Landis Communities, but I felt like I still was missing community. I've always been a part of a gym. I've always had like a gym community, and that's when I joined Women's Alliance. And so Women's Alliance is a group kind of based off, it's all throughout the United States. And so we do a 30-minute workout together, and then we do a 30-minute devotion time together. And the group is endurance, beauty, and valiance is kind of our symbol. And then we talk about being vulnerable. So never will I have ever thought about talking about any part of my life to anybody, but going to Women's Alliance, just trusting people with the most intimate parts of me was something I never thought I could do. I remember the very first day I was there, I had a girl talk about a terrible, horrible incident that happened in her life, and I thought, wow, I just met you. This is so different. But Women's Alliance, there's where I met Tiff there. And then has just completely changed my life. And so we have different call signs there. So once you attend 3 different group gatherings, you can call sign, and that just, you tell a little bit about your life. And then you have people who kind of call out different names. I'm onward just because of my life, kind of moving from the past on. And that's just call sign. People think it's a cult. It's not. It's just a really nice group of women. And I don't know about you, but I did not have the best group of women around me growing up, just women who were petty and always looking for ways to bring you down. But this was just this is a fantastic group. So I just want to close just a little bit here. I want to talk about questioning God. I questioned God and I rejected God. But if you question God, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Questioning God and saying, what are you doing, God? That's just part of having a natural relationship with somebody. And when you're questioning somebody, if let's just say somebody did something wrong to you and you ask them that question, like, why did you do that? Like, help me understand. What brought us to this point? That's a normal part of a relationship. And doing the same with God is just a typical part of your relationship. It's different than rejection. So asking God, what's happening, what's going on, why are you doing this, is different than saying, God, I don't want you in my life. You don't deserve a place in my life. 2 completely different things. So I just want to be sure, that if you're questioning God, anything that you're going through right now, it's completely okay. It's okay to question and ask God what you're doing, but God will bring you through. And one of the things I've noticed in my life, I still struggle with body image issues. It's something I feel I will always struggle with. I see my therapist every other Thursday. I love her to death. I tell everybody to go to a therapist. When I was younger, I think people would say in elementary school, middle school, and high school that you're crazy if you go to a therapist. Nobody's going to want to be around you if you go to a therapist or you go to a counselor. But that's just the stigma that was there then. That's not there now. It should not be there now. If somebody says, you're going to make me go to counseling, be like, good, that's a healthy way to cope with anything that you're going through. And so that my counselor has really helped unpack a lot of these boxes that I have put lids on and threw in the back of my mind and didn't want to unpack. When I was married, my ex-husband would come up from behind me to give me a hug, and I would push him away. It was just a natural response to push away, but talking that trauma through with my therapist brought me back to when I was a kid and I was with my next door neighbor. Not wanting to be touched, but never talked to my ex-husband about that because I never wanted him to think that I was dirty or used or to judge me in any way. And that was on me. That was my fault for not doing that. And there are a lot of things that, looking back, I would have done differently. I would have been more vulnerable and would have talked about. But having that fear, that shame, that judgment was something, in hindsight, I wish I didn't have. But that relationship with God and knowing, that God takes those things away. God sees you as a beautiful person. The circumstances in which you've been in do not define who you are as a person. And that is something that I have had to learn throughout the time that I've lived on this earth. So, kind of want to talk to you a little bit about my dad right now. This is kind of a really neat story. So, back in 2014, my dad had a quadruple bypass. And he was drinking a ton. My dad's a type 1 diabetic, did not take care of himself, wound up in the hospital, had a quadruple bypass, had sepsis, and then because he's a diabetic, he lost most of his right leg, part of his left leg as well. And so he had to get prosthetics just because the sepsis had just deteriorated his legs. And so from there, his life started to change. And so my dad now today is in seminary. He's actually his second year going into Bible school. My dad's a chaplain for the Army. My dad was in the Army. He's a chaplain now, not drinking. My dad, the grandpa that he is for my kids, is the dad I wish I had. And so sometimes I can't dwell on that. I can't dwell on, man, I missed out on this guy. Because then that just kind of sucks me back. And I feel like that's Satan kind of sucking you back into, oh, look what you lost. You know, don't trust that person. You hate your dad, don't you? But that's not. Like, I am so grateful that my dad turned his life over to Jesus. I am so grateful, you know, that he trusts God and that now he's going to seminary and he helps other people with their journeys, all that they're going through. And just what a praise that is to God. How he's turned his life around. So I'm grateful. The only thing is, what that's annoying with my dad is when he calls and he's like, how do I write an APA paper? I'm like, oh, Dad. But yeah, life is very, very blessed in that regard. So, but I thank you so much for listening to me going back and forth throughout my journey. You know, I really appreciate you taking this time. So, thank you. Yeah.
Wow, thank you.
Of course. One thing I do have, I'm going to pass these around because I struggle with anxiety. I still struggle with depression. So some of the things, you don't have to take one if you don't want one, but this is more of a breathing exercise. To tuck this away if you'd like. Put this in your purse, put it in a bag. When you don't feel that Jesus is there, or you feel alone, or you're wondering what God is doing, this card is it's a breathing exercise. You inhale, for example, and as you inhale, you say, be still and know, and as you exhale, that I am God. And then there's a memory verse here, the Spirit of God has made me, the breath of the Almighty gives me life. And then on the back, there's an additional verse. Each one is different, no two are the same. And so each one will have a different inhale and a different exhale. So again, if you need to be closer to God, or you need to feel like he's there with you, you forget that he's present. I just wanted to pass these out as well.
Wow, thank you for
And
thinking
feel
of us.
free to take one for a friend if you'd like.
Wow, well, anybody questions for Kat? She gave us a lot there. Wow. Anybody? Questions, comments, encouragements?
I think you're beautiful.
No, we're not sisters, like, not biologically.
Tiffany is my massage therapist. You might remember her because she spoke before. But she is an important person in my life. She is excellent at what she does, and when I'm there, the hour is like 15 minutes or something. Like, we're both like, what? It was an hour already? So yeah, she's awesome. What were you gonna say, Dawn?
I think you're beautiful.
Yes.
When you say you struggle, I'm like, how? You're
Right, I
We said
know.
that too.
Yeah, your smile is beautiful. I mean, everything, really. Like, what is wrong with people? Seriously, kids can be so cruel. I know, I was made fun of too. So I know what that's like also. So, you know, can anybody relate to parts of her story?
Oh my gosh, so much. But she already knows. But the one thing that I will say about Kat is she's just always been such a strong example. Like, you know, she really is a leader. And knowing like the background and, you know, it's just like what we were talking about earlier, like God using everything for his glory. Like, you really are like, you know, like walking in like God's blessing in your life, and like we're all like getting to be a part of it. So I'm grateful. But also sorry you had to go through all that. But like, you know, obviously it's you know, it's definitely showing up for God's glory.
Good. And that's why we tell our stories, right? That's why we tell what God has done in our lives. Because other people benefit from it, you know. And I say it all the time, and you guys probably get so sick of hearing it, but it's just so true, you know. And at the prison this morning, we were talking about that God never wastes a hurt. He recycles our pain to help other people. So that's what you're doing by sharing your story. And is this did you say this is the first time you shared?
Yeah, first time I shared my full story.
Bless your heart.
So,
Thank
well,
you so much.
Okay, so trusting you all with an intimate part of me is not something I ever thought I'd do. So thank you. It was part of my healing journey. So I
Yes.
appreciate you all so much. I will never forget this. So,
And the more we share, the more we're healed. And you have to, what was it today? Revealing brings healing. And the more times you tell your story, you get the healing, but also you help other people too. So that's why we share what God has done. And you know, you had a lot. I really like when you said from your childhood you had the box that you put the lids on and put it in the back of your mind, because that's what we do. And sometimes we need that therapy to take those lids off and have someone else speak truth into the lies that we believed about ourselves through whether it was our parents or other people bullying or whatever. And I can relate to you trying to keep the peace, you know. I mean, I didn't have alcoholism in my family or anything, but, you know, I was a peacekeeper too and try to keep everybody happy. And so that led into codependency, and I have to make everybody happy and, you know, keep everybody, I don't know, together. And that's not good for us to do that. And then it sounded like you hit the moment of surrender face down on the floor, right? And you said, I can't do this anymore. And that's what God wants from us. When we finally give up doing things our way and cooperate with Him and do things His way, right? That's when He can work then, because we hold on to stuff like this with closed fists, but when He can finally pry our hands open, you know, then He can work. When we give it up, then He can work. But you also said your past does not define you. I really like that too. Anyone else? I'm talking too much. Everybody's quiet.
Would you say you have a good relationship with your dad now, and have you talked like pretty intimately about how that affected you and kind of how you both were during that journey?
yeah, so we haven't had that talk yet.
Okay.
So that's probably a piece of my healing journey that I would love, but and my dad and I will be back up a little. Our relationship is much better than what it's ever have been. It's probably the best it's ever have been. But I would love to have that conversation to say, wow, like you hurt me. I want that apology. I want like hey, I apologize for the name calling and scaring you and all of like the police and all of it. I would love to get an apology. But at the same time, I'd let that go because I don't know that's ever going to happen. And I don't want to hold on to any of those feelings. I would always feel that I deserve that. I deserve that apology. That's going to help me move on. That's going to help me heal. But it's just not. It's not. And I need to let that go. Sometimes you won't get what you're looking for, that closure, and it's okay. A friend once told me it's kind of like going after, if you're walking and a snake bites you, and then you chase after that snake, asking it, "Why did you bite me?" But that kind of sounds really silly, right? Like the snake's never going to tell you why it bit you. You're not going to get the closure that you're looking for, so why you got bit by that snake. And so the same thing, you know, with my dad. He may or may not ever apologize. He may not ever acknowledge what he did. One would think because he has that relationship with God, but it, you know, I have no idea. And there are a lot of things I could think, but I've let that go.
Yeah,
And
well,
where's your mother in all of this?
Yeah.
Have you talked to her about it?
Yeah, so my dad actually apologized to my mom a couple months ago. So I think it's like slow moving. So my mom actually, she came to visit. She visits like all the time, but she was like, "You're not gonna guess what happened." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Your dad sat me down." Actually, no, she was wheeling him. My dad's in a wheelchair. So they were out, you know, walking, and she was wheeling him, and he said, "You know, Olga, I'm really sorry for everything I put you through." She's like, "What'd you say?" And he was like, I'm really sorry for everything that we went through. She goes, "It's okay, Frank. Sorry." And she was just in pure shock. She was like, "I couldn't believe it." And she's like, and I told him, she's like, "You realize you have to apologize to all your kids." And he goes, "I know." So, yeah. But whether or not I see in this lifetime, it's okay. But I'm grateful he apologized to my mom. That's huge. She endured a lot. That woman, bless her heart.
yeah, so we let the Holy Spirit convict, you
Yeah.
know, and show Him. And it sounds like he knows,
Yeah.
but, it takes a lot because we all have that pride. And to ask people for forgiveness, it takes a lot.
Right.
But it sounds like he's on the right track.
Right.
Wow, that's amazing what God's doing there. But I'm sure you all prayed for him, And also what he's gone through, losing his legs, that kind of brings an awareness of, hey, I'm not gonna live forever, type of thing. Yeah, and you brought up about being mad at God. Some people think, that's not allowable. But he can take it. He gave us emotions. He has emotions. He can take it when we talk about, look at the book of Psalms, right?
Yeah.
And even Lamentations is all lament, and David starts out being mad at God or questioning God in the Psalms, and by the end of that chapter, he's praising him, So God knows we need to get that stuff out, so, and the questioning, same thing, so, yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I like the part about the questioning that was a good reminder for me that that it's okay to question God and, because I've been struggling with some things and I don't know if I'm afraid that I already know what his answer will be and I don't want to accept it, you know what I mean? But, I appreciated what you said. It was just very inspiring and encouraging and I needed to hear that, so thank you.
Even Jesus said, why have you forsaken me?
Yeah.
Yeah, he can take it. He can take our anger. I went through it. We probably, if we're honest, we've all been angry at him at least a little bit in our lives for different things. But yeah, he understands. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is special that this was the first place that you shared your story. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. But you'll get more healing because of it. Yeah. Did you tell your counselor you were going to do it?
No, I can't wait to tell her. We had so much to talk about last Thursday. So.
Yeah, when I posted your picture and everything on our Facebook page, Casey was like, hey, she's our newest board member. And yeah, so like Kat said, Effort Area Social Services is going through a rebranding and they're going to be called Community Hive, which I love, because they're all little busy bees when I go over there, buzzing around and helping the community. I love Casey and I love what you guys are doing. And for anybody out there listening in Facebook land, Citygate has partnered with Community Hive to offer lunches over the summer for kids in Fulton and Highland Elementary schools, for those kids that are in the reduced or free lunch program during the school year. There's nothing for them during the summer. So we are looking for churches or businesses or individuals who will donate the food, and then we will hand it out here at Citygate. We picked Thursdays, Casey and I picked Thursdays to do it. Thursdays filled up in 2 days, and so I called her, I'm like, hey, I think we can add another day. So now we're gonna do Tuesdays and Thursdays the whole summer, but we do need volunteers and food for Tuesdays. So I don't know if you even knew that we were doing that.
That's great.
It only happened I don't know, Deb, in the last week or so? So I'm really excited about that, because it will, bring more awareness to Citygate and what we do here and help us connect more with the community, and hopefully, people, we try to point people toward Jesus here, so hopefully, we'll see some of that as we're here doing that. So if anybody out there or anybody's church is here would want to help with that, you can contact me or Casey over at Social Services. So that's an exciting thing that's happening. So thank you guys for coming. We'll be here next week. Join us in person, you guys out there. And so we'll be back next week. And thank you very much for sharing.